Hello everyone and welcome to the last session of the New Man series. This is Masood Ramandi and today we want to end this series, and I trust that it would be full of encouragement, full of life for every one of us, because we're talking about the new man, the life of the new man, and the newness of life that has been given to us by the revelation of the Spirit. So it is something new to all of us. It is something that we are growing in, and we need encouragement in continuing to live this life. So basically, where I ended last week was about our identity as being established as spirits that give life, okay, as spirits that give life, spirits that make alive. Now, I showed you based on Romans chapter 8, verse 10 and 11, that the Spirit is life because of righteousness. Okay, I'm a spirit, I am life, and that's because of righteousness. It's not because of works of the law. Okay, it's because of the persuasion of the heart unto righteousness. Because Romans chapter 10 tells us, with the heart one believes unto righteousness. The heart believes righteousness. Okay, believes itself into righteousness. It doesn't believe itself into sin. That's what we believed in the past. The heart begins to see itself as the righteousness of God, as the mirror image of God, as the image of God, as the image of the second man, the Lord from heaven. That all I covered in last week's message. But today, we want to look at basically a life that is lived this way, okay? Because we're not talking about us being God in the sense of when we say we are spirit, we are life. We're not talking about like I am and there is nothing beside me. We're not trying to create any new theology, but what we are trying to see is what actually God has shown us in the sense that He has made us one with Him, okay? We are life because He is life, and everyone who is in Him finds himself connected to Him, and the same life begins to flow in him. Anyways, so let's look at Romans chapter 5 and verse 21. Okay, this is Romans chapter 5 is a comparison between Adam and Christ. 1 Corinthians 15 showed us that Adam was the first man, Christ is the second man. Okay, so this now also shows us how connected Romans chapter 5 and 1 Corinthians chapter 15, which I talked about in last week's message, how connected they are. So then it goes on to say in Romans chapter 5, there is something about what came through Adam and entered the world, and all who came after him experienced the same thing. Now there is something that came through Christ, and all who come through him experience the same thing. Okay, so comparison. So that comparison goes on in every verse of this, basically the last several verses of chapter 5, and specifically the very last verse, verse 21. So that as sin reigned in death, this is in Adam. So sin reigned in death. There was a time that the one that was reigning was sin. Okay, now when basically sin was reigning, who was sin reigning over? Us. Why? Because we have seen it in chapter 5 and chapter 6 that we were slaves to sin, and that means the sin was the master, the king. Okay, we were obedient to the voice that sin was speaking, and that by doing so sin reigned, and it says in death, so it created death in us. But now you're talking about spirit that is life, so that's the second life. It says even so now grace might reign. Okay, so it's time that grace would reign in the new man. The old man, in the old man, sin reigned. But in the new man, grace begins to reign. Who is the king? Grace. King Grace reigns. Now it says grace might reign through righteousness. Okay. grace might reign through righteousness. What does it mean that grace would reign in righteousness? Let's look back at look at basically the first part of the old life of the Adam's life. It says sin reigned in death. Sin reigned in death. But now grace reigns through righteousness. So how did sin reign? If you look at the first time that actually the word is used in the Old Testament, it's the story of Cain, when God begins to talk to Cain. And God tells him, because of the situation that he was under, he says, behold, sin is knocking at your door. Behold, sin is knocking at your door. So when the sin knocks, when something is knocking, what is he trying to say? What that thing is trying to do is to come through the door. So God says to Abel that sin wants to enter you, but you must rule over it. You must master over it. You shouldn't allow the sin to come in, because when it comes into the house, it will rule over you. So you shouldn't allow sin to come. Well, New Testament shows us the place that sin was ruling was heart. It is a sin that is called the sin of unbelief, that the heart was diseased by it. Okay, the heart was diseased by it. So the heart was an unbelieving place. So sin reigned. How? By stopping the heart to believe what God has said. Remember the story of temptation and all of that? What was the temptation about? Not to believe what God had said. Now, what is the opposite? It says grace might reign now through righteousness, which means grace is God's gift, isn't it? Grace is God's gift given to you, God working through you, God working on your behalf, all of that. And it says there is a need for a grace in us to work. And it says it will work through righteousness. What does it mean? When you begin to see, once again I say, that you are the righteousness of God, that you are righteous, then grace would be received by you more and more. Why? Because it's the heart that believes unto righteousness. And it was the heart that believed unto sin. It was the heart that came into unbelief. It's the heart that comes to belief. So when a heart that is believing, a believing heart, sees itself righteous and receives grace much easier, it doesn't labor. It's easy for a righteous heart to receive from God a gift of grace. Okay, so anyways, we were talking about the spirit that the spirit that is who we are now, and the more we actually live by this consciousness, the more it will we will see the result of that in our life. So let's now look at a few verses before that to see more of this. Look at verse 12. It says, therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world. So what man? Adam. Sin entered the world. What does that mean? Unbelief entered the world. Okay, his children were trained by the wisdom of unbelief. His grandchildren were trained by the wisdom of unbelief. They were made wise by their own heart, unbelieving heart. Instead of receiving that which God gives, believing what God gives, their own heart began to dictate what is true. Okay, this is just amazing. I mean, I think we have seen some of these verses as if, I mean, what mankind has done, man attributes to God. It wasn't God that did anything evil to man. It was man that began to become evil. How? By rejecting the life of God, by rejecting that gift of God. So when you reject something, you have a hole in your system, in your heart. And what are you going to try to do to actually fill it with something? That's when you begin to talk, to begin to think, and begin to analyze, and begin to um, gain wisdom, and that is not God's kind of wisdom. Anyways, so he says through Adam, that way of life, that lifestyle of sin entered the world, the lifestyle that man became self-sufficient. No need for God, no need for truth, no need for revelation of his identity. Just to go out and work and make for himself something, to make a name for himself, to make, you know, a city for himself. Literally, that happened a few chapters later. Genesis chapter 10, the story of the Tower of Babel. That's where the children of Adam got together and he said, let us make a name for ourselves. Well, I thought the name of your father was in your forehead, upon your forehead, that you were all children of God. Why do you need any other name? Oh, because they don't know they are the children of God. They're making a name for themselves. See how separated life, separated mind can actually make us to labor. And this is not the life that God intended for us. Anyway, so therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world and death through sin. Now, you know the story. Again, God said, the day you eat, you will die. Simply, the day you unbelieve, you won't believe, you will die. Right? God said the symbolic language was, eating will make you die. Here, it says sinning will make you die. So eating is sinning. But what was the sin? Unbelief. What did they eat? The false teaching, which came in the form of a temptation. And we know all of that. Has God really said? We know that in the life of Jesus. If you are the Son of God, did God really say you are the Son of God? Okay, so anyways, therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all sinned. Verse 14, verse 15, but the free gift is not like the offense. Okay, so he suddenly changes the language from sin, from what came through Adam, but then now the gift. And the gift that came through another man. Let's continue. For if by one man's offense, Adam, many died, because remember, sin entered, unbelief entered, and death could work through unbelief, much more the grace of God and the gift by the grace of the one man, Jesus Christ, abounded to many. Okay, so he's trying to say now God is bringing us back to the way it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be not by unbelieving, not by sin. It was to be by believing, by receiving that gift of grace that God gives. This is basically the life that, we looked at verse 21. Sin reigned in death, but now grace reigns through righteousness, which means God's will for mankind is to receive grace and a little bit more grace and even a bit more of grace and even a bit more grace to the point that you have received that which is called the abundance of grace. Let's continue. Verse 17. For if by one man's offense death reigned. See, offense calls death to reign. Offense causes death to reign. That's amazing. Offense. Okay, I don't want to go into the whole meaning of the word offense and what it looks like, but an unbelieving heart that doesn't believe that love that is shown to him will be offended at the one that is giving life. Do you think Adam was offended also in the garden? Yeah, he was offended at God. Now, again, no need to go to the details, but offense, we see this even, the normal way of saying that somebody is offended and all of that, they're kind of experiencing death or creating death. When somebody is offended at somebody, what are you experiencing? Is it joy and happiness and all of that? Obviously not. It's just the exact opposite. So verse 17 says, by one man's offense, death reigned through the one, much more those who receive the abundance of grace and of the free gift of righteousness will reign in life through the one Jesus Christ. Through the one Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ is the one through whom you receive these things. You receive grace and righteousness. How do you receive it? Well, back to the story of the cross. It's where he works, his soul labors, and instead of you laboring, he labors for you. Now, what does it look like? That simply means that he showed that God has never been asking anything from you except a hearing ear and a believing heart, nothing else. But man thought that I need this pair of earrings only to know what God commands me to do. And it's not like that. God wanted man to understand what his heart was. So, through the one Jesus Christ becomes the one through whom the will of God is fully manifested. He shows that when I lay down my life for you, that means I don't want your life. I don't want the labor of your soul. I don't want you to bring sacrifice from your soul. What I want you to know that you are children. And if you are children, you are heirs, heirs of God, and co-heirs with Christ. See, this concept of grace, righteousness, salvation, this must continually go within us. In fact, Romans chapter 10 also gives another aspect to this. It says there are only two things. There is a heart that believes and a mouth that confesses. Because it says, with the heart one believes unto righteousness, and with the mouth it's spoken unto salvation. Righteousness and salvation. So it says that wholeness that you're desiring, that salvation that you're desiring, comes from righteousness. Okay? People think it's from sin to salvation. No, it's from righteousness to salvation. Okay? There was a sin, and then there is a righteousness that wipes that out. And that righteousness, the confidence, boldness that comes from righteousness, makes you to experience that salvation, which is wholeness, which is the full picture of who you are with all the inheritance and authority and power and everything that makes you whole as the one that God had created you to be. So it's not like you're being saved from sin and that's it. No, there was a sin. You were saved from sin of unbelief by giving an identity of righteousness because you believe that's who you are, and the working out of righteousness makes you whole. The boldness, once again I say, of righteousness shows you that you have access to a grace. That's how it works. That you have access to this grace and you receive that grace and you begin to become whole a bit more and more and more. Well, I don't want to become technical saying that you are already whole. Obviously, if you don't experience that, there is a difference between it, the objective and subjective, the truth and the experience of that truth. So we are not in the mood of just trying to say it's all that I need to be, I already am, and then go about living our own way. I don't think there is anybody who is listening or watching this message has that in mind, thinking, well, I'm already good, let me just go live my life. And then the result of that life is nothing but, again, labor. Okay, so we're talking about having that which is truth received and experienced. So because of that, now we're looking at basically the life of the new man, the spirit, recognizing that he's now righteous. Remember, we talked about this. The spirit basically is the righteous spirit. That righteous spirit, by grace, brings wholeness to the rest of our being, to the soul and to the body. Okay, so now my point is, when we say I am a new man, I'm not the old, that means I shouldn't be under the law of the old also. I should be under the law of the new. Okay, and the law of the new has nothing to do with sin. Okay, it's all about more revelation of righteousness so that you experience more salvation. This is, all over. Romans chapter 1 verse 16 onward says that Paul says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto this salvation. Okay, for in the gospel the righteousness of God is revealed. Okay, righteous, the power of God unto salvation, but he goes on back, says, because that gospel that is brings salvation, that gospel first reveals righteousness of God. Okay, and in the revelation of the righteousness of God, you are being revealed as his righteousness, as his mirrored image once again. Okay, so when you see that, seeing your righteousness, then salvation. Seeing your righteousness, who you are, what is your right, what is your inheritance, then receiving all those things. That's the process of righteousness to salvation. There are multiple verses in the Old Testament, in Isaiah and in Psalm, that actually puts these two beside each other, righteousness and salvation. Even they are also named as different parts of the garments of the priest, in the form of a robe of righteousness and a garment of salvation. There are things, layers that you put on. Okay, back to new man. Put on the new man. How do you do this? There are layers of this clothing that you put on. Righteousness and then salvation speaks of that which is from within to that which is in the outer, to be seen. Righteousness in the heart, experiencing salvation on the outside. Okay, so I don't want to go the full 30 minutes today. This is the last session. I want to give you a bit more time to kind of perhaps go through, of your mind, just go through that which we have been talking about from the beginning of this series. And I think it's been 19 sessions, if I'm not mistaken. Just bring all of that to this last session and see how actually this can give you tips for your day-to-day life. I know that not everybody has that availability of time just to go through the scriptures often and read them and study them. I totally understand that. That's why I'm saying let's get a few tips, something that can actually become, if you don't remember anything from the teachings, just to have those few and consciously make a decision for the next 30 days to actually have a list, maybe 4, maybe 5 of the things that are practical according to the revelation of this new man, and live by them. Okay, maybe you need something in your morning, right after you wake up, to actually make you sober quickly and you start your day that way. Maybe you need something for your midday when you are, in the midst of everything that has been coming your way, and you need to have a reminder going back to those tips and realize, oh, wait a minute, let me just pause and let me know the truth. And perhaps you realize that you're not a soul, you're a spirit, and you operate from that place. Maybe you need something for before the bed, when you go to bed and you want to have, a peaceful, calm sleep, and get those things in your mind, meditate on them, and go to bed by that. That's why I will leave it at this point. I hope this series have been helping you to get a bit more understanding of the new man, the things about the new man. Obviously, there are more to be that we can talk about. There were things that I could talk about, but I know that you have heard them from other places. That's why I wanted to be a bit more unique. So you have something, you put all the teachings that you have had from other sources beside this, and all of this is toward helping you. Again, bless you. I pray that your heart, your mind, your body would experience this life, that the spirit that is in you, the spirit that you are, always would be ruling over your body by giving life to that body, that you always would have a remembrance of righteousness, a consciousness of righteousness, knowing that you are the mirror image of God, that you are his child, that nothing can separate you from his love, nothing can separate you from him, and not even you can separate you from him. Okay, he is faithful to keep you, to save you, to make you whole, and by that confidence live your life in him. Blessings, and we'll see you soon.